Poverty. Poverty can be defined as a social phenomena in which a section of the society is unable to fulfill its basic necessities of life. Okay. Unemployment is a situation. Unemployment it is a situation in which individuals are ready and willing to work at the prevailing wage rate but do not get to work. In India, poverty and unemployment are estimated using the Consumer Expenditure Surveys and Employment and Unemployment Surveys of NSSO, that is National Statistical Office, NSO, respectively. Okay, poverty is by Consumer Expenditure Surveys and Employment and Unemployment Surveys of NSSO, that is unemployment measurement. Next. Next part is consumption expenditure. The consumption expenditure data was collected by NSSO through various rounds of household consumer expenditure surveys HCES. It has been conducting these surveys based on large samples of quinquennially from 1972. Quinquennially means for 5 months. These these surveys are the primary source of data on various indicators of living standard of different strata of the population at the national and state level. Okay, they are used for planning, policy formulation, decision making, and as inputs for further statistical exercises by various government organizations, academicians, researchers, and scholars. Based on this survey, various reports are being published by NSSO. Based on these reports are assigned with particular serial number. For example, one of the reports based on 68th round is level and patterns of consumer expenditure 2011-12. Okay, its serial number is NSS report number 555. Okay, its short report number 555. A detailed description of household consumer expenditure is given in the chapter 2 of the report 555. The initial paragraph of the same is reproduced below. 2.1.2 Household consumer expenditure. The expenditure incurred by a household on domestic consumption during the reference period is the household's consumer expenditure. Okay, for the reference period. Okay, expenditure incurred towards productive enterprise of household is excluded. Productive enterprise of a household expenditure incurred towards productive enterprise of household is excluded. This is important. Okay, from the household consumer expenditure. Also, consumer means it is not productive, it is for consumption only, not productive. Then also excluded are expenditure on purchase and construction of residential land and building, interest payments, insurance premium payments, payment of fines and penalties, expenditure on gambling including lottery tickets, money given as remittance, charity, gift, etc. Okay, these are not included here. Please note down it. However, self-consumed produce of own farm, self-consumed produce of own farm, or other household enterprise are valued and included in household consumer expenditure because they are used for own consumption. So are goods and services received as payments in kinds or free from employers. Goods and services received as a payment in kind or free from employer, such as accommodation, medical care, traveling allowance, excluding the allowance for business trip. These are also included here. This is very important in the household consumer expenditure. Next part, to find out the head count of people falling in various levels of consumption, the monthly per capita consumption expenditure, monthly per capita expenditure is calculated from household consumption expenditure. It is arrived at by dividing the household monthly consumption expenditure divided by household size. Okay, this is monthly per capita. To collect the consumption expenditure data, the respondents are requested to call and report the volume of consumption during the particular period, say week or month. This is called reference period or recall period. These respondents were requested to recall their consumption of the three groups of items. Okay, three groups of items. Which are these three groups of items? Food, pan, betel leaves, tobacco, intoxicants, fuel and light. Food, that is त्यानंतर pan, betel leaves, tobacco, intoxicant, fuel and light. Then clothing and footwears. And third is miscellaneous goods and service and durable articles. The report number 555 summarize monthly per capita expenditure based on different recall periods in page 9 as follow. First, uniform reference period. Okay, or monthly per capita expenditure uniform reference period. Household consumer expenditure on each item is recorded for reference period of last 30 days preceding the date of survey. Mixed reference period, MPCE, mixed reference period. Household consumer expenditure on items of clothing and bedding, footwear, education and institutional medical care and durable goods is recorded for reference period of last 365 days, and expenditure on all other items is recorded with a reference period of last 30 days. Okay, done. This difference should be understand, take into consideration. Mixed reference period, clothing and bedding, footwear and education, institutional medical care and durable goods. Okay, then modified mixed reference period, MPCE, modified mix. Household consumer expenditure on edible oil, egg, fish, meat, vegetables, fruits, spices, beverages, refreshments, processed food, pan, tobacco and intoxicant is recorded for a reference period of last 7 days. Okay, and for all other items the reference periods are the same as in the case of mixed reference period. The consumption expenditure collected by the above method is reported for rural and urban areas separately. The rural and urban prices for the consumption items for which the data was collected is also collected by NSSO and are used to arrive at the value of the consumption. They are reported fractile classes wise. Okay, fractile is that point which a stated function or decimal equivalence of the value lies. Okay, for the consumption, once again read it again. The consumption expenditure collected by the above method is reported for rural and urban areas separately. The rural and urban prices of the consumption items for which data was collected is also collected by NSSO and are used to arrive at the value of consumption. They are reported fractile classes wise. Fractile is that point which is stated fraction or decimal equivalence of the values lie. MPCE, monthly per capita expenditure, fractile classes of population may be referred to simply as 0 to 5%, 5 to 10% and 10 to 20%, etc. The range of MPCE is divided into 12 fractile classes based on the population following within that range. For example, in the 61st round, it was found that the bottom of most 5% of population was having MPC in the range 0 to 30 to 35. Okay, it is obvious that with 0 nobody can survive, but it is the bottommost non-negative integer. Hence, range was fixed as 0 to 235. The average MPCE URP of this fractal class was constant at 1993-94 price for rural is 114 rupees and for urban is 141. To illustrate it better, 12 fractal classes and respective range of MPC for rural and urban is tabulated below for 61st round. Okay, look at this fractal classes and MPCE class for rural and urban areas separately. Poverty estimation and consumption expenditure survey. Data collected through HCES are used to estimate poverty and inequality. The 61st round survey 2004-5 of NSSO has fixed 356.3 and 538.6 as per capita monthly consumption expenditure as poverty line for rural and urban areas respectively. These data 356.3 and 538.6. The estimation of poverty using this monetary measure is called income or consumption poverty or money metric poverty. The counting the people below this or any other level of income or expenditure by fixing it as a poverty line is called head count ratio. Using different methodology, poverty is calculated based on this data. NSSO and Planning Commission used a different methodology to estimate the incidence of poverty. NSSO used mixed recall period method. The Planning Commission used uniform recall period method. हा difference important आहे. Due to different methodology, hence their and difference in the period of estimation they cannot be compared. Hence, their respective estimate is presented below in table. Different approaches to poverty estimation. The above approach is called subsistence approach. Okay, it focused on individual level and measures whether the individuals are able to meet their physiological needs, namely food, pan, tobacco, intoxicant, fuels and lights, clothing and footwear, and miscellaneous goods and services and durable articles. The subsistence is the state or fact of existing. Okay. The Oxford Dictionary defines subsistence level as a standard of living or wage that provides only the bare necessities of life. The people who could not afford even the bare necessities of life are called poor. The subsistence approach is unidimensional approach. Higher level approach is basic need approach. It is relatively wider than the subsistence approach. It focuses not only on individual level but also on community level. It necessitates provision of amenities and services like sanitation, education, healthcare, etc. at community level, and those who lack these facilities are considered poor. This approach is multidimensional. The relative deprivation approach looks at poverty at broader level compared to the previous approaches. It is wider than the above two concepts and measures deprivation an individual or group face compared to others. It goes beyond physical and basic needs and especially focuses on social inequality. Physical and basic needs and especially focuses on social inequality. Social exclusion also considered in this approach. It is one of the measures of relative poverty. This approach is also multidimensional. These three approaches to poverty are represented graphically, reflecting their scope. First is subsistence approach, then basic need approach, and third is relative deprivation approach. Absolute versus relative poverty. The poverty line based on subsistence approach measures absolute poverty. Okay, this is absolute poverty. It measures an absolute term as to how many in people are below reference point. The poverty line fixed in India is one such reference point. As seen earlier, NSSO fixed rural poverty line at rupees 356.3 2004-5 price and estimated rural poor people as 170.3 million, and it is 21.8% of the all India population. So this is the absolute poverty. Okay, in the relative poverty measures, in the relative poverty measure, the poverty is measured in relative sense. Okay, it is measured against any one measure of centrally tendency like mean, median, quartile, percentile, etc. In this measure, person falling within 70, 40 to 50 percentile of income may be above poverty line but are poor compared to persons falling within the percentile of 60 to 70. This measure helps to find out inequality that exists in society. The usual tendency is to compare the topmost group with the bottommost group. Okay. Measures of inequality. Quintile income ratio. Okay. The quintile income ratio is one of the measures of inequality. It is a ratio of average income of richest 20% of population to that of the poorest 20%. So quintile ratio, income ratio, is average income of richest 20% divided by average income of poorest 20%. Percentile divides the whole population out to 100 equals subgroup, say 1%, 2%, 3%, etc. Okay, decile, decile divides the whole population into 10 equal subgroups, say 0 to 10%, 11 to 20%, etc. Quintile divides the whole population into 5 subgroups, 5 equal subgroups, say 0 to 20%, 21 to 40%, etc. Okay, and quartile divides the whole population into 4 equal subgroups, say 0 to 25%, 26 to 50%, etc. They are called position average and measures of central tendency. Position average and measures of position average and measures of central tendency. Okay. Then Lawrence curve maps the relationship between the percentage of income or wealth earned or appropriated and the percentage of people earn that particular percentage of income and wealth. Okay, the cumulative percentage of income is measured on y-axis and cumulative percentage of people is measured on x-axis. Okay, income and people. Okay, here look at this cumulative share of people from lowest to highest, cumulative share of income earned from lowest to highest. The figure AB, this is the line of equality. Okay, this is the line of equality. Then the line AEB is the Lorentz curve. This is the Lorentz curve. Okay, it is the line of inequality. The point E shows that 90% of the people, 90% of the people, here are the people, this is the 90% line, earn 60% of the income. This is the 60, this is the income line, this is the people line, and the remaining 10%, this is the remaining 10%. Okay, there's earn what, 40% of the income. This 40% of the income, this is earned by remaining 40%. Okay, so there is a inequality. So Gini coefficient measures the inequality using Lorentz curve. It is the ratio between the area between the Lorentz curve, this Lorentz curve, and the line of equality and area below line of equality. So Gini coefficient is the area between the Lorentz curve and line of equality, and divided by area below the line of equality. Okay, the area above Lorentz curve is the area between Lorentz curve and line of equality. So AEB divided by ACB, so that is the Lorentz Gini coefficient. Okay, so if it is a 0, then there is a equality. So in case of Gini coefficient is 0, it is equality. It is 1, then there is very much inequality. Okay, next, poverty estimation in India. Poverty alleviation is one of the key objectives to improve the standard of living of people in India after independence. Okay, one of the key objectives to improve the standard of living. Next, the Planning Commission kick-started official poverty estimation in India. Later, various committees were formed to estimate the poverty in India. Subsistence approach is used to measure the absolute poverty. There are two methods. There are two methods. Under this approach, one is cost of basic needs (CBN) and the other is food energy intake method. Food energy intake method, cost of basic needs and food energy intake method. In cost of basic need, food and non-food related needs are considered. Food and non-food related needs are considered. First, the expenditure to be incurred on a food basket needed to meet prefixed calorie is calculated. It is called food poverty line. In the second stage, along with food, non-food related basket of goods is identified and the total amount of expenditure needed to meet them is calculated. Is called aggregate poverty line. FEI, food energy intake method, is the expenditure needed to have prefixed level of calorie consumption is found out and the poverty line is fixed. The commonality to both approaches is both considered food energy intake and actual pattern of consumption data is needed to arrive at the poverty line. Next, perspective of perspective planning division working group. A working group was constituted in 1962 and it submitted report in the same year. Okay, it submitted report in the same year. At the national level, it fixed per capita monthly bare minimum consumption expenditure of 20 rupees at 1960 to 61 prices. For rural, it is 18.9 rupees and for urban, it is 25 rupees. It placed 60% Indian below poverty line. It appears that it appears that balanced diet prescribed by the Nutritional Advisor Committee of ICMR form the basis for fixing the above amount. Okay, balanced diet prescribed by the Nutritional Advisor Committee of ICMR form the basis for fixing the above amount. It is food energy intake approach. It estimated that along with expenditure needed to meet the dietary needs, reasonable expenditure needed for consumption of other items is 30. Okay, expenditure needed for consumption of other items 35 rupees. If this amount has been adopted, 40% of the Indian people would have been placed under the poverty. 80%. Then, task force on projection of minimum needs and effective consumption demand. It was constituted by Planning Commission in 1977 under the chairmanship of Y.K. Alag. Okay, it submitted its report in 1979. It fixed nutritional requirement for rural area at 2400 kilocalories. Okay, and for urban area 2100 urban areas. It was based on the recommendation of nutritional expert group of 1968. The task force used NSSO's first quinquennial consumption expenditure survey of 1973 and 74. Um, okay, then consumption expenditure survey presents data of quantity and value of each food and non-food items fractile glass wise along with proportion of the population falling in that fractile. The calorific value and the corresponding amount of expenditure can be calculated. The task force calculated that 49.09 is needed for urban rural area and 56.56 for urban areas to meet the above prescribed calorie intake at 1973-74 prices. It is also a case of World Food Energy Intake method. The Planning Commission updated poverty line for 1977-78 and 1983-84. First, the consumption expenditure distribution given by NSSO fractile class wise was scaled up by Planning Commission using the ratio between mean private final consumption expenditure of CSO and NSSO. It is adjusted consumption. It is adjusted consumption expenditure distribution. It was updated to current prices using CSO's PFCE deflator. It is nothing but what we seen in the chapter CSO SNA. The previous poverty line is multiplied by this ratio to arrive at current year's poverty line. This mere updating of existing poverty line for price led to problem of mismatch between the quantum of expenditure and the nutritional value of that expenditure. The updated poverty line fell short to meet the required nutrition. This is called nutritional drift. Next, expert group on estimation of proportion and number of poor. The expert group was constituted under the chairmanship of Professor D.T. Lakdawala in 1989 and it submitted its report in 1993. It recommended to discontinue the Power Planning Commission's adjusted consumption distribution based poverty line. It endorsed the methodology adopted by 1977 task force under the chairmanship of Y.K. Alag. it endorsed the methodology. Okay, takdawala. Then recommended that year 1973-74 needs to be treated as base year. It also recommended to update rural poverty line using consumer price index for agriculture labor, okay, and urban poverty line by using consumer price index for industrial worker and consumer price index for urban non-manual employee. It also recommended state specific poverty line, okay, state specific poverty line using state specific prices. It also cautioned not to continue with 1977 task force methodology forever. Expert group to review the methodology for estimation of poverty. Next, it was constituted under the chairmanship of Professor Suresh D. Tendulkar, okay, in 2005, and report was submitted in 2009. The committee adopted new method moved from calorie based poverty estimation to a basket of commodity based approach. It called poverty line basket. It identified poverty line baskets based on 61st NSSO survey of 2004-5. It also relied on NSSO data of recall period method. Mixed recall period method. It also called to adopt poverty line for rural area also after adjusting price differential. It means the quantity of consumption fixed for both urban and rural is same and only price differs. By this, the urban India poverty line basket, which is fixed at 578.8 and revalued at 446.8 for rural area at 2004-5 prices. Okay, this committee fixed poverty ratio for all India total at 37.2%, rural India 41.8%, and 25.7% during the year 2004-5. Okay, for 2009-10 it estimated 21.9%, and for 2011-12 it it is 29.8% at all India level. It also recommended state specific poverty line based on state specific prices. The expert group stated that it moved away from traditional method of anchoring poverty line estimate based on nutrition. However, it cross validated its estimate with nutrition based approach, saying that actual expenditures incurred on nutrition, education, and health is equal to or adequate to cover the PLB suggested by it. Expert group to review the methodology for measurement of poverty. Okay, there was a lot of criticism about the Tendulkar committee methodology, so the government formed an expert group to review the methodology for measurement of poverty under the chairmanship of Dr. C. Rangarajan in 2012. It submitted its report in 2014. It adopted the method of calorie based methodology as in the past. Okay. In addition, it accounted for nutrition, fat, and other essential non-food items to arrive at poverty line. It fixed 972 rupees per capita month as poverty line for rural area and 1407 for urban area 2011-12 prices. The poverty ratio at all India level for 2011-12 comes to 29.5% in 2011-12 and 38.52% in 2009 and 10. ability to pay best poverty line. The author of this book, in his article Poverty Redefined, published in Business Line on 2 July 2014, argues to fix poverty line at the level of basic argues to fix poverty line at the level of basic exemption limit fixed for income tax purpose.